welcome to our session on student life. My name is Michelle Bunch. I'm a student in that MARC program, and I have 5 of our awesome graduate ambassadors here with me. So we're all going to sort of talk about what it's like to be a student at Georgia Tech. So we're all going to go around and introduce ourselves. Myself, Chris, Danny, Caitlin, Joel, and Tyler, and then we're just going to sort of get the ball rolling with things that we love about Georgia Tech and, all the odds and ends about what we do in and out of studio. So like I said, my name is Michelle Bunch. I am in my final year of the MARC 2-year program. I also graduated from Georgia Tech in 2016 with my Bachelor of Science in Architecture, and I grew up sort of in and around Atlanta. So I've sort of been here pretty much most of my life, and it's been a pretty good transition. And I decided to come back to Georgia Tech largely because of the challenge that it presents. I was looking for a program where I knew that the faculty would really push me to do my best, and I definitely found that at Georgia Tech. And Chris, I'll pass it off to you.
Thanks, Michelle. So hi, I'm Chris Trump. I am first year of graduate school here at Georgia Tech. I also did my undergraduate as well here at Tech. So I just graduated from that in 2015 and just went, or 2019, sorry, and just went straight through. So took a summer and then started grad school right after. I'm also from the kind of greater Atlanta area, so I've been here for most of my life. And I really chose to come to Tech, I guess both times, just echoing what Michelle said, knowing that it just has that reputation and that security afterwards, knowing that a lot of people around Atlanta, a lot of firms are Tech graduates that started them. So there's a really strong community around that here.
My name is Danny Marques. I am in the last semester of the 3.5 year. A little bit about my background. I'm originally from Venezuela and lived in South Florida most of my life, so I've only really been in Atlanta for about 4 years. I graduated from SCAD in 2017 with my degree in interior design, and part of the reason I chose Georgia Tech, coming from, I would say, a highly conceptual artistic school like SCAD, I was really looking for that technical challenge, and Georgia Tech is definitely, I would say, pushing the boundaries of what we're doing in terms of technology and architecture and what's coming, which is pretty exciting. Other things that I'll touch on maybe a little bit later with Chris and others, I'm part of the student organization Equity in Architecture, and just really excited to be part of this with everyone.
Hey everyone, I'm also in the 3.5 year program, but, my name is Caitlin, and I'm in my first year of it, so kind of new to architecture, and my undergrad was in mechanical engineering, and I worked for about 1.5 years in Atlanta in civil transportation and civil structural, and I'm actually not from Atlanta either. I'm from Alberta, Canada, and kind of came down to Georgia on a soccer scholarship during my undergrad, and have been in Georgia ever since. And the reason I chose to come to Georgia Tech was just kind of coming from a technical background. I wanted to go to a place that really excelled technically, but also had that artistic side that I was lacking. And it's just kind of been this perfect blend of everything you would want. And I'm also part of Equity in Architecture, and I've actually started a new club this year called ECO, which is kind of focused on making our learning environment and our studios more environmentally conscious. Pass it on to whoever's next.
Thank you again, everyone, for attending. It's so good to see all the names kind of popping up here. My name is Jesu. I'm originally from Uganda, East Africa. I've only been in America for about 7 years now. In fact, I just got my permanent residence about 2 weeks ago. I am in the last semester of the 1.5 year MSUD program here in the College of Design. And I previously actually got my master's degree at Georgia Tech as well. And so this is my second master's degree. And as you can tell, I decided to stay because I could not get enough of Georgia Tech. And I previously, before coming to Georgia Tech, I went to University of Memphis for my bachelor's in architecture, and so that's where I transitioned to come get my master's degree in architecture, and then now MSUD. I'll say this, one of the major reasons, on top of Atlanta being a great city and Georgia Tech being one of the world's best architecture programs, really was one of the major reasons why I decided to come. Was I visited Georgia Tech without telling anyone, and I didn't set up an appointment. I drove from Memphis, came to Georgia Tech on a random Friday, and I walked into Hinman's studio, where we have all kind of the master's degree studios. I walk in and I loved everything about the space. There were students from all over the world. There were professors from all over the world, people speaking multiple languages. And I remember standing on the edge of Michael Gamble, who I'm sure y'all will kind of have an encounter with him because he's the head of the master's architecture program. And I stood right at the edge of his studio, and one of his students said, "Hey, Michael, there's a student over there." I did not know Michael at the time. It was the first time, I saw him. He dropped what he was doing. He came and had like a 20 minutes conversation with me. And in that conversation, he did not say anything about Georgia Tech. He just wanted to get to know me. And I remember leaving kind of that impromptu visit, and I knew this was the exact place that I needed to be, for just how warm I felt and how comfortable I felt. And so that was, to me, a major reason why I decided to come to Georgia Tech.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tyler Poulos, and I'm originally from New Orleans, Louisiana. So I actually have a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering, similar to Caitlin. My bachelor's degree is from Florida State University, which is actually a school that didn't have an architecture program. And kind of like midway through there, I realized that I really, really wanted to study architecture, but it wasn't like available to me. So that's when I started looking into schools where I could kind of blend what I learned in mechanical engineering and like take that into the world of architecture and do something highly technical, but also kind of build this artistic skill set that I never really got in my background. So nice to meet you all, and hope to hear your questions.
All right, thanks everyone. So just to kind of get the conversation started, I thought we would all sort of go around and talk a little bit about what we love about being a student at Georgia Tech. I know some of us have already sort of touched on that. And, I'm sure that we could talk about this forever, but one of the things that I really love personally is just the culture. The student body in general is very supportive of one another. We tend to be very involved with, each other's lives and studios, and just, the atmosphere in Hinman and at Georgia Tech is really, really sort of convivial. And, we have a lot of great student organizations. So I know we've got representatives from pretty much almost every student organization. I believe we do not have anybody from NOMAS today, but that's the National Organization of Minority Architecture Students, and they participate in a competition every year, which really brings them together. They go to the NOMA National Conference, and I'm still sort of hearing stories about how much of a great time they had when I'm sort of around in Hinman. So that's some of the things that I love about Georgia Tech.
So I'd have to say one of the largest things that really, especially I wasn't sure first coming in when I was an undergraduate, even on tech, even on architecture, but I got in the program and I sat and went through it and just kind of fell in love with it. And I think why was mainly because of just the support and the diversity of the student body. I mean, you see people from all over the world that just challenge you in a creative and a constructive way to really rethink how architecture works and can affect people, and then all the resources that you have at Tech to make that happen really, really made me fall in love with the program here.
I'm gonna echo what Michelle and Chris have said. I think a big part of what program you choose to go for school is who you're going to be around with for those next couple of years, and to have a student body as diverse, as engaged, as collaborative and supportive of each other like this is a huge part of it. I would also like to say the faculty echo the same, I'd say, attitude towards everything that we do. They're there for you. They're as involved and thoughtful and supportive of you throughout your entire journey through the master's programs. They're there to really, I'd say, assist you achieve what you'd want to get out of this as much as possible, and even push you to realize things you didn't think you were capable of. So it's really great.
And yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing. Just with my class specifically, we're all completely like a wide range of ages and a wide range of backgrounds. So and we've become really close. Like we have a WhatsApp group and we're always like messaging each other in it and reminding each other of homework or something like that. And or sometimes just complaining, you need to do that. But we've become like really close, and it's just really nice to have that support of your classmates, and then all these different mindsets when you're thinking about a project. And then specifically for me, coming from a smaller school, Georgia Tech is just like unreal to me. Just the opportunities, there's these amazing facilities that any idea you have will come to fruition no matter what. Like if it's a faculty member that's going to help you through it, if it's a facility, if it's a classmate, it's just kind of never ending here.
I would say though that on top of just the incredible facilities and the people, and of course for a lot of students, I've been around Georgia Tech a little while now, and a lot of people know me as somebody who loves people and I love talking, and so one of the greatest opportunities for me is definitely meeting people from around the world and just getting to know them. But I think one of the fascinating things that I, as a student, get to experience on a daily basis is you have a world-class, really, really accomplished set of faculty members. And these are people who are experts in their field. They're respected people around the world, and you get to interact with them every single day. We have world-class designers who are, again, respected in their field, come and give lectures almost on a weekly basis. So really, the ability to, as a student, encounter people who are respected in their field from around the world is really, really incredible. I think one of the clearest expressions of that is during the final year studio reviews. Students have the opportunity to actually ask the professor to invite a designer or a professional of their choice. And 2 years ago, we had literally some of the greatest minds in the field of architecture in Hinman on final review. It was unbelievable. And that's because the student says, yeah, I want Marlon Blackwell to be on my review. And sure, they'll invite Marlon Blackwell to be on your review. So I think that ability to touch and interact with people who it is really, I think, a very, very important thing as you develop kind of your professional ability and build on your connections, for sure. I would say, though, that lastly, as a student, you have the ability to shape your academics in the way that you want. If you want to do an independent study, any field, and that might be in digital fabrication or robotics or high performance building or kind of a very specialized research project, you are able to shape your own career the way you want. And it's a matter of going to the leadership, say, hey, I want to study this, and they'll find ways for you to study that. So I think in that ability to shape your academic interest, I think is really, really, really profound. And I found that really fascinating. Tyler, I think it's you next now.
Yeah, I actually do apologize. I got kind of caught up reading all the questions on the side, so I missed the question.
We're talking about what we love to do, what we love about being a student at Georgia Tech.
Okay. So something I actually forgot to mention earlier is that I'm actually a PhD student. So something that I was looking for whenever I was looking at programs is a program which is really cross-disciplinary and collaborates a lot with different disciplines. Because I just really didn't want to feel like I was like siloed in my own little area being a PhD student. I wanted to know that I could do work with other people from different backgrounds and from different places and really research new things that I've never even thought of because I was always like worried about mechanical engineering. But really, one of my favorite things is that even within the School of Architecture, like there's so many different people doing so many different things in all of the different labs. Um, I mean, from like shape computation all the way to high performance building and like healthcare design, we're doing all of these different things all at once. And there's a lot to learn from all of the different labs and all of the different students, not only like master's students, like there's a lot of things to learn from like undergrad architecture students, which I found have very interesting ideas and typically think of things that I would have never thought of in my life. So I'm just really impressed by like how much everyone wants to work with one another and how much everyone wants to hear your input.
Great point. And I think the last thing that we were just going to go around briefly to talk about, which will also sort of start to address some of the questions that I'm seeing pop in, is the sort of things that we like to do outside of studio, just really briefly. Because yes, it is a tough program. It's definitely a challenge. But I think we all sort of have ways that we like to sort of get out of studio. It's really important to us that we have that balance. So, I mean, I love to attend different things where I can be active. Like I like to go to dance classes or yoga classes. It's a really good way for me to just sort of unwind.
Yeah, so my life outside of studio is basically anything I can do outdoors. I love all things hiking, exploring, all that stuff. I run a lot. I ran in high school and everything like that. I continue that here at Tech. So um, exploring the city through running, finding new trails, the Beltline, the Path Trail, Stone Mountain's really close by, Kennesaw Mountain's really close by. There's really close by areas where you can kind of get out of the city, but you're still in the city, if that makes sense. Atlanta is known for, it's being kind of a city in the forest. So there's really great opportunities and places to go that just kind of separate you from the hustle and bustle.
Um, Similar to Chris and Michelle, just a way to stay active, I think, in Atlanta outside of studio is really important. I approach that either through walking the Beltline, but I also really love exploring the food options here. It's such an international city that you can almost find any cuisine that you can think of. And so that's almost really engaging to go do with your friends on the weekends. There's so many good places around campus too that are small and local. So it's just really fun to kind of explore how many different cultures are here through the cuisine.
Yeah, similarly, I didn't grow up in a big city, so living in Atlanta has been like a discovery process. And Atlanta's kind of unique too because it's the city of neighborhoods, and like different little areas that all have a different personality. So I kind of like to go explore all those different places and like the food. There's a lot of breweries. There's a lot of like little different hubs, which is like you can look them up later, but like Pont City Market or Krog Street Market, where these places are kind of old factories that were redone into mixed-use buildings that are really fun to go to as well. And then, like Chris said, City of Trees, so lots of nature within the city too.
On top of being a full-time student, I actually also I'm a co-founder of an architecture, urban design, and real estate development firm in Atlanta. And so outside school, I am very much involved in the business of architecture and going after projects and actually doing projects, of course, as a lead of the firm. But besides that, I love music, so I play instruments and I play guitar, and so I enjoy playing at home. I live very close to campus. I'm able to walk everywhere, ride my bike everywhere, so that just allows me to kind of explore Midtown. But the other thing that I love to do is I love cooking. So I spend a little of the weekend just trying different cuisines around the world. My wife and I travel a lot around the world, and so part of what we do is we buy spices from around the world every time we travel, and we also buy mugs from around the world. So that's something that we love to do, and so that when people come to our house, they can eat food from around the world and use plates and cups from around the world as well. So I love that outside school.
Yeah, so outside of school these days, I end up spending a lot of time outside with my dog. But in my first year, well, like going back to that, there's actually like a lot of green spaces around Atlanta to go to, and there's a lot of ways to be outdoor and a lot of ways to be active. But what I was saying before is like in my first year, I also wanted to go around Atlanta and like find all the best coffee spots. So actually, I would spend hours and hours and hours just biking all the way across Atlanta to go to that new coffee shop that I heard was good. And I was really impressed with like how many options for coffee and also for food there are in the city. Because I'd never really had access to this many things all at once within such a small radius to me. So I'm just really impressed by what Atlanta has to offer in terms of food and drink.
All right, thanks for that overview, guys. Let's dig into some of these questions. So one that I would love for some of the student organization leaders to address is, let's see, where did it go? Someone asked, are any of the student organizations involved with community outreach? Yes, absolutely. Take it away, y'all.
I'll go ahead and jump on that quick. So first, I am the Vice President for Graduate Students of AIAS, which is the American Institute of Architecture Students. So something that we have for community outreach is a Freedom by Design position or a chair or committee, which actually goes and is planning to work with, typically it's a position that works with a community member in need or something around the community in need and does a small service for them in an architecture program or an architectural way. So we work with a firm and we work with the person, our client, but we really just seek to help them as we can as architecture students. So that's one way or one organization that has kind of a grasp in the local community outreach.
I can jump in for equity in architecture. So I'm the current vice president of graduates for EQAA. One of the ways that we try to do community outreach is we often volunteer with NOMAS actually on doing outreach to local elementary schools to present to kids early on in their education. What is architecture? What does it look like to be an architect? And kind of let them know what are the possibilities within this field, who are the types of, how inclusive it can be to everybody. And so that's one of the few ways. We've also gone and done mentoring programs with some of those students if they're interested. I was part of an outreach last summer with, again, GT Vice President Monica McCullis. We went to Morehouse College, talked to some of their rising STEM high school students and asked them if they needed any mentorship opportunities. And we went and gave them kind of a discussion about what it is to be an architect from our experience, an architecture student, both at the undergraduate and graduate level. So the way that we try to do community outreach is usually by trying to get in contact with the community, especially children and those in high school, to kind of give them a leg up in what this process, what this profession looks like.
And just a little thing about with ECO, since we are so new, we actually haven't had any events regarding that yet, but our plan for the next semester is to go to some local schools and donate models and materials that we kind of have gathered from kind of reusing and recycling within the studio, and just kind of educate school like K to 12 kids about what architecture is. And they can keep the models as well, keep them in their art classrooms or their science classrooms, and kind of give them a little bit of inspiration about architecture. which when I was younger, I didn't know anything about architecture. So that's kind of the goal, is to spread more information about it, as well as kind of provide the kids with something that they can physically touch and handle and see every day.
Great. Oh my goodness, y'all have so many great questions. Let's see. I'm going to try and group some of these so that we can kind of get to as many of them as possible. So some of the ones that I'm seeing pop up, a lot of them have to do with, let's see, work-life balance and working while a student. Can you manage to work while studying, especially if you are in the MRH program? Let's see. Oh my goodness, this is great. Have any of you done the internship during spring break? How easy do you feel it is to find an internship in Atlanta? I can address a little bit of this. I work part-time as a student. It definitely makes it, yes, it definitely ups the challenge of doing it, but it is possible to do it. And, you know, a lot of students are sort of in a position where they're putting themselves through school, and sort of having to work to be able to do that. And I think for the most part, it's something that you should sort of gauge, maybe like gauge your workload a little bit and sort of see how you feel about that before necessarily jumping all the way in. But I think a lot of the faculty do sort of understand some of the pressures of having to work while being a student. I'll let some others jump on that and go through some more of these questions.
I can jump on that a little bit. So yes, like Michelle's saying, it certainly is a balance, and I think gauging your workload is always helpful. I have classmates who have worked straight into the program, and they have continued to do so until their last semester, and they have been able to manage it, but not for me personally. I really wanted to gauge what the pressure of studio or just my workload in general and my learning curve for myself would be before I jumped into an opportunity. I would say there are many options around Atlanta and on campus that are available. Personally, I work on campus as a research assistant, so I have the flexibility of not having to commute to my job, which I would say is a huge factor in someone who's working. I have classmates who also just have their workplace be close by to campus if it's off campus, and that really does affect kind of the ease of work and school at the same time. But again, I think this is something that would just depend on your personal experiences and how you balance these two out together.
Well, I would say also, just to add, Michelle, if you will, is that I run and manage a higher company, even though I'm a full-time student. And that one has come with a lot of time, me finishing my MAC program first and now getting my second master's degree. And I also I'm a teaching assistant, and so I help teach other classes in the MSUD program. And what I've really found, because a lot of people ask me, Joel, like, how do you, like, you're co-founder of a firm, teaching classes and doing full-time school, and you're married. When do you get time to sleep? And usually I tell people that it's really all about how you prioritize your time and the things that you have to do. It is absolutely possible, because I've done it. I've done it for almost 2 years now. But I think I would recommend, though, in your first year of your first semester, not to jump in, just like I said, because you want to make sure you gauge that you can actually do it. Just because a lot of students do it, it doesn't mean it's appropriate for you, particularly if you're an international student. One of the challenges as an international student is you will see that a lot of international students end up not working while going to school. Of course, there are restraints with, your I-20 and all that kind of logistical things. But as an international student, a big challenge is that you're trying to acclimate to a new environment. You're trying to acclimate to the city. You're trying to acclimate to a new teaching culture. You're trying to acclimate to, the professors, a lot of students, you're trying to acclimate to language. So I would say the first semester, just see how it goes and see if you can handle adding something else.
And I'm going to jump in real quick. Something that I think was sort of asked in the questions as part of this sort of conversation is, have any of you guys done the Practicum program during the spring break?
I have.
You have? Could you talk about your experience in the Practicum program?
Yeah, of course. So I did the Practicum program last spring break. I was in New York and I got to be with the firm WXY, which is Urban Design Meets Architecture, founded and kind of run by Claire Wise alongside the other partners in the firm. It was really exciting. Basically, I had opportunity to be in New York for a week. You get to shadow at that firm, and that means, they might have you helping with certain tasks and teaching you a little bit more about how they run and how they work. But I also had the flexibility, and I was lucky enough that WXY had a lot of their projects in the part of town that I was in. So I got to actually go and see and experience some of their projects at full completion and hear from the staff and Claire, just how that came together. It was really exciting. I got to experience a lot of new things throughout the week. So each day was almost a little bit different. I got to go to city board meetings and understand a little bit more about what it is to shape urban space, which as an MArch student, I didn't have necessarily that exposure before, so that was really great. And I also got to experience more of the architectural, I would say programming side, so a little bit more about data. So it was really exciting, and I'd say definitely highly recommend it to those who can do it. Again, I had classmates who, the options are in different cities. There's multiple firms in various cities as well. So while I was there at the same time, we had a classmate of mine who was at Marques, another classmate who was at a firm in Brooklyn. And so it was really fun to kind of be shadowing at all these different firms for the week and kind of come together and see what everyone's been up to while we were in the same city. I also had classmates who were in Seattle, St. Louis. It just depends on where you'd like to be, but highly, highly recommend it if you have a chance to do that while you're in the program, to do it.
Great. Yeah, and then the last one on the jobs front, I believe Yunsheng asked this question about how easy do you feel it is to find an internship or a summer internship in Atlanta. I think this is something that we're going to be navigating going forward, but every year the school hosts a career fair. I think we had probably close to 50 employers come in this year, where on a studio during studio time on a Friday, we can go around and talk to representatives from different companies and just sort of get the sense of what they're looking for. The school will usually publish a list beforehand about what firms are attending, where they're from, and what positions they're hiring for. And so I know a lot of people who have gotten summer internships through Career Fair. You can also just sort of meet different people at events throughout the year. That's how I ended up getting a summer internship last year, or this past summer, was through someone that I met at the AIS EQIA NOMA resume workshop. Started asking questions. But in general, yeah, Georgia Tech has a pretty good reputation in and around Atlanta. We'll sort of see how this goes with the upcoming job climate. But in general, yeah, it's a great city for getting connected through Georgia Tech. If anybody else wants to jump in, feel free to jump in. I'm just going to start looking through some more of these questions.
Well, I'd say at least what I've noticed is that the question may not necessarily be about
It looks like Joel may have lost his connection. Hopefully he'll be able to come back online in just a minute. I think we should address some of these questions about just studio life.
Yes.
I'm seeing a lot of that come together.
Yes, that was one of the next things that I was going to get to. Let's see. Yeah, one of the very first questions, how often do you work late in the studio? Will it be overnight very often? I would like to know about the study pressure at Tech. Um, I'll just be honest. Yes, I have stayed overnight in the studio before. It does not happen frequently. It's not like I'm doing this, every single day for weeks on end. But sometimes it does catch up with you, absolutely. I'd be lying if I said it didn't. Um, but at the same time, I think the faculty really try and work with the classes as much as they can. Like I know last spring, our structures professor was really good about trying to schedule things, sort of avoiding other deadlines and making sure that, if we raise an issue about, hey, I have 3 deadlines on the same day because of the way that these classes have been structured, they will sort of do everything that they can to try to help, like, balance that and help keep us, sane and functioning. I don't know if others want to jump in.
I'd like to just say that it depends, I think, on you as a person too, because you do have time before our studio schedule Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We start at 1:30. So there's some of us who are morning people, and we just come in early and get the work done, and by the time studio is done at 6:30, you're done with the day, and you get to go home and do dinner. Some of us work late because we prefer working late. So I would say it depends on you and also your time management skills. I would say there certainly is enough time to get a lot of the work done. But I would say you have to be kind of disciplined and organized with yourself too, to kind of avoid those late nights. They can definitely happen if you let work kind of catch up to you.
And just a little thing I want to add too about that is like to not get discouraged in your first semester or your first year, because there is a large learning curve with things, especially if you're in the 3.5-year program. You might be putting a lot more work into that first year, just learning all these softwares, learning about modeling, reading up on things, just really getting to know architecture. So I have found that it's been pretty hectic for this first year, but it's still manageable. And one thing that helps a lot too is making sure that you have a nice home setup as well, or just somewhere you feel comfortable working outside of the studio as well. Because just kind of breaking, not staying in one place for hours on end, kind of helps too.
Yeah, that's been a big help for me, is just sort of having a setup that I can use at home. And it also, I think, relates a little bit to what Rosanna was asking. So she's asking, what was the deciding factor that made you guys choose the MARC at Georgia Tech, which I think we sort of addressed. And then what is the studio culture like? How have you guys been dealing with the COVID-19 situation, having to abruptly switch to an online format, especially having to do with studio? Which, I think this is one way where I think the faculty have really been on board in trying to sort of make this completely seamless. And, obviously there's a learning curve with these things, but because we do have such a supportive studio culture, I think that it's been, a fairly smooth transition. I know my studio was pretty much online half the time anyway. I am in Deborah Mesa's design and research studio. She's the Ventulet chair. She's visiting from Boston. And so she comes in every other week, and then we have class with her online in the in-between weeks. And this is sort of the off situation, but I can let others speak to sort of how studio culture is at Georgia Tech. I know we touched on it a little bit, and how we've sort of been dealing with the transitions, things like that, if you'd like.
So I'll jump into that really quick. Again, studio culture is really, I would say, again, just collaborative, community-oriented at Tech. In terms of the work, again, your professors are there to facilitate and expand on your education, and they're there for you. And so the studio culture that I've experienced throughout my 3.5 years here is just incredibly, I would say, supportive, again, both from the faculty and the student side. And just a really great community. In terms of how we're dealing with the current situation, I'd say compared to other disciplines, and again, just have family members that are completely different fields at school, such as dentistry and just such different, I guess, workflows. We're doing fairly well, and at least in our studio in the last semester in Michael Gamble's. We typically already work very digitally to start with for this degree, and the only thing that we're really lacking, and I know Michelle is still making it happen for her studio, is physical modeling. So even during these circumstances, I'd say we're still doing almost the same, with flexibility, of course, what we would be doing otherwise. So it's been pretty smooth for us. It also, I think, has opened up the opportunities for how digital workflows or presentations can now enhance what we make. So, for instance, typically for plotting, now we can have animations in our presentations, and now we can have videos and things like that, which is, I think, just kind of upped the work. And the way that we keep talking about it in terms of our studio is that these are skills that you're going to take with you to your workplace. And so learning how to work remotely, whether out of, need like we are right now or not, is just enabling us to be more flexible and versatile once we join the workforce.
And to add on to that as well, we also have like student representatives that for every class. So there's 2 people for every year within the master program that are elected to talk to the chairs of architecture, Julie and Scott, every month. So I'm the representative from my class, and what's been really helpful is there's a lot of anxiety and just like unknowns between the class, but having that direct contact with the chairs of architecture has been really helpful in easing everybody's worries with everything going on. And we've actually been able to get all the questions answered that people have. And one suggestion that the chair Julie brought up was that every studio create this thing called a Miro, which is where you kind of have online pinup boards. But something that my class was struggling with was we were so used to interacting in studio and walking over to someone and being like, what are you doing? Or what do you think about this? But since we're all online and separated, we have created this online Miro board where we're just posting things as we go and putting questions on there. And it's become it's made it a lot more interactive, and it's helped people with motivation too. Because it's just hard sometimes, or you just feel alone working on studio when you're used to something so collaborative before. So that's just kind of something that's helped recently with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Another sort of set of questions that I'm sort of seeing emerge has to do with whether or not, and some of y'all have started to address this in the chat window already, but whether or not Georgia Tech is really heavy in terms of technical skill. I think the most recent question on this is, where would you say Tech lands on the theory to practice spectrum, analog to digital, as far as drawing, modeling, etc. And I know we have a wide variety of programs, and Georgia Tech as an institute does have a reputation of being tech heavy, and the School of Architecture does tend to sort of thrive in being in that environment. I would sort of personally say that you can really start to find a window for things that are more oriented towards theory, if that's something that you are sort of slanted towards, because technology, at least in my personal opinion, does also have a lot of social implications, which we are able to address. For example, I'm in an independent study this semester, which is really looking at representation theory, which is not necessarily something that most people are doing, but you can absolutely pursue that if it's something that you are really interested in and you want to make a case for. I don't know what others think. I tend to think that we fall more towards practice-oriented things. And as far as analog or digital, both are supported.
Yeah, I would say, can you all hear me? Because I went out for a second.
I can hear you.
Okay. One of the biggest reasons why I decided to choose Georgia Tech in my kind of particular MAC program was I wanted to go to a program that was less theoretical, but very practical in testing the theories that they were studying. And I see that a lot at Tech, where the digital fabrication lab and just our laser cutter really trying to blend the theory and practice, where you're researching something and designing something and making something. I think that is kind of something that is very, very clear. Now, as far as digital and analog, I would say there are great opportunities to experience both. For example, I actually do about 80% of my design work by hand, which somebody in a Georgia Tech program will be like, "Oh, what? Really?" But I thought of my work by hand, and I couple that with the digital tools that is really unique to me, And so I would say, because every one of you who are coming from multiple international backgrounds, you don't have to suppress your journey when you come to Georgia Tech, because differences that you bring and how you work is really what makes Georgia Tech Georgia Tech. For example, I grew up in Africa, never touched a computer any one time until I started architecture school. And so my hand has always been my design tool, and it's still my design tool even at Georgia Tech that has all these digital tools.
All right. How are we on time? Are we going until 10?
We can go until 10. And I'll just also plug really quickly, the next session begins at 10 a.m. and it will be discussing Atlanta and our resources here at Georgia Tech. So if we don't get to your questions about like things to do in town or resources on campus, those will be addressed in the next session too, beginning at 10. And you're welcome to jump off even if we go a little bit long. We are recording this session and it'll be available on our website probably tomorrow.
All right. Thanks, Carmen. I'd like to maybe address a couple more, unless any of the ambassadors see something that's just sort of burning. One that's sort of jumping out at me: how competitive is it within studios? Not at all. It's very rarely the case that we are competitive amongst ourselves. I know.
Friendly competitive.
Yeah, rarely.
Yeah. I was gonna jump in and say it's a healthy competition. It's not like negative, like, oh, you can't see my work. It's like progressive and build, and typically productive.
Yeah, absolutely. Even the competitions, the Portman Prize Studio is the spring semester of the, I guess the first year of the 2-year MArch and the second year of the 3.5-year MArch. And even a competition studio did not feel like a competition at all. For most of the semester, it's mostly us trying to sort of celebrate each other's work and help each other progress.
That's actually something that is why I chose to come to Georgia Tech, because I visited a couple other schools. And I actually talked to Michelle on my visit, but she told me that too. I went to the Portman Studios and watched everyone present, and they were in a competition with each other, but I was just watching how they interacted with each other, and they finished their presentation, and then like 3 or 4 people would come up to them and tell them how they did, or like they talk about it and help them prepare for their presentation. And I just was so surprised by that even though they were competing to win, they were still willing to help each other. And it wasn't something that I saw at other schools, especially like in the studios. It seemed like everyone was like really into their desks and didn't interact with each other. So I think that's kind of something special about Georgia Tech.
Hey, Michelle, I know we have a few minutes left here. Do we have any MSUD related questions? I've tried to answer a few of them kind of in the chat, but I just wanted to see if there are other questions related to the MSUD incoming students that I might be able to answer.
Actually, Joel, if you don't mind, really quickly, I think this would sort of address the questions that I've seen. Can you just kind of talk a little bit about your experience in the MSUD and, how it's differed from the MArch?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in spaces outside buildings. In fact, in my undergraduate degree, I always got in trouble because, they would give us a building site and designing 5 blocks around the site. And my professors were always like, Joel, you got to keep to the project. And so I came to Georgia Tech and did the MAC program. And I still felt like, there's certain kind of skill sets of understanding larger problems and systems that I still did not experience in the MAC program. And I met Richard Dagenhart, who allowed me kind of do his studio, which is a whole different thing. Usually, certain times we have students in the MAC allowed to kind of do a studio as an option in the MSUD program. So I was fortunate to do that. And I think my encounter with Dagen had drastically transformed, I would say will forever transform my career. He encouraged me to do the MSUD, so I decided to stay. And it's been really good because I've been able to actually help Richard teach some classes, take some classes. The reality is that you really, in the MSUD program, you're wrestling with systems that are in cities. You're wrestling with ecology frameworks, you're wrestling with water, you're wrestling with transportation frameworks. You're really designing whole systems as opposed to just site. And so I think to me, it's been really, really amazing to be in the MSUD program, meeting different professionals. Ellen Jones and Richard Dagenhart are really, really respected people in the urban design field around the world. And so they're really great people to learn from. And it's usually a small cohort of students, which makes it really nice and neat. Now, I would say that this year, the urban design program is STEM accredited. And so, the suspicion is that there's more students who are going to come and do the program. But otherwise, it's been really fantastic. There's a lot of urban design work out there. And there are very few urban designers in Atlanta. And so when you do the urban design program, the likelihood that you would get a good internship or a good job is really, really high. Because, there are very few people who think on a building scale and on a city scale and design problems at those multiple different scales. So I think it's been really, really fantastic. And honestly, I would recommend students who are doing MAP, doing the MSUD as well, because your design abilities will never be the same if you're designing 400 acres as opposed to, less than an acre.
All right. Let's see. Do we want to take one more or do we want to wrap up?
I think we're about ready to wrap up so that everybody has time to logged into the next session. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. One thing I want to point out before everyone logs off is that you can contact all of our graduate ambassadors. You can find their contact information on our graduate ambassador page, which I am going to send you the link to in just a second. And you can reach out to them if we didn't address maybe some of your questions. You can send them an email directly and get information that way. We're excited that you all joined us today. If you have other questions, like I said, you can contact them. You can also reach out to Robin Tucker and Nitra Wisdom if you've got some more admissions-related questions, maybe some more technical questions. And we hope to see you in the next session. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. This was good.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone, for joining.
All right.